Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Living Ancestor Podcast. In today's episode, I want to talk about one of the things I have been contemplating a lot as of late, which is the different ways in which people and traditions orientate upon the process of working with the soul, what we call the soul and what we experience as the soul. And there's obviously many different traditions and many different orientations, and especially today in the modern world, we have a slew of differing perspectives. So certainly this landscape is diverse. However, if we take a bird's eye view of the general orientations, we could say and categorize two major paths that are very common. And while this talk is not going to be completely exhaustive of everything that someone could do in terms of orientating upon the soul, nor is it going to be exceedingly historically rigorous, trying to tease apart the nooks and crannies of many of the ancient traditions that we have inherited into modern times that work upon the soul. But more so, I'm going to give you a metaphor that can help people identify what path they're on and what general overall orientation they seem to have. Because this general orientation seems to emerge for most people without there being a conscious choice of doing so. It tends to be something that's already kind of happening. And I want to preempt this by saying, even though I do myself know that I am on one path versus the other, that I'm not making a value judgment about the correctness of a particular path. And what might seem like a stronger bias is really just my own deeper understanding of having inhabited a particular path. So with that said, let's talk about what the soul is through the metaphor of a person who is working with a painting and a canvas and going through the process of doing so. And I really like this metaphor because it does talk about how the soul is a kind of process. Not necessarily a noun, but something that is occurring continuously. And obviously the English language can sometimes get us stuck in noun thinking. It's a very noun-focused language. So when I say the soul, often it does sound like I'm talking about a thing that is already pre-made, but more so, it really is discussing a kind of process. So, with that said, let's go into this metaphor. I'd love for you to imagine a person who is sleepwalking. They are currently asleep, and they have no idea that they are asleep and painting. That is, that they have gotten up and they have gone to a canvas and they have prepared everything, and they're in the process of painting something completely unaware. Now, suddenly, they awaken, and they notice, whoa, I am in front of this canvas, and there's a painting that's emerging in front of it. Now, what we tend to call spiritual awakening, in whatever context you understand that, is this process, this event of awakening to a picture that is in front of you, that's unfolding, and you're in this process of painting it. Now, what most people think of as awakening is often the end, but really awakening is just the beginning of becoming aware that a painting is emerging, that you're in this process. And now you, with this painting, is the soul-making process, is the process of working with the soul. And let's not get caught into the specifics of what's the soul and what's the painting. It's all just this dynamic for the sake of this metaphor. So now the interesting thing about this is that we notice that the painting is already underway. So we have awakened to something that is already there. And what that is could be anything, and it depends on your personal cosmology. if you believe in past lives and you understand that there are ancestral patterns moving through generations and affecting your life, and there's astrological patterns as well as the cultural patterns and societal patterns and the individual patterns of how the person has responded to what has been unfolding in their life. Well, any and all of this can make its way into what's already there. We could think about it in a sense as karma, as conditionings, as deeper orientations of the person, as the stories that they have and the stories that they don't want to have, as the stories that they want to keep and as the stories they don't want to keep. Any and all of what is manifest in the process of experience itself is what is on this canvas already. And yes, that also includes our emotions, our desires, our passions, our wants, any and all of it. It's there on the canvas. Now, one orientation towards this overall process is to begin to dissolve what's on the canvas, and to begin to release what's on the canvas, to get rid of what's there, simply to see what happens initially. And as you go through the process of dissolving and dissolving and dissolving, all of a sudden you start to notice that there is a white blank canvas behind it. And that's interesting. The blank canvas becomes something that is interesting. And so you begin to go through the process of dissolving and then painting over it, and then dissolving and painting over it, and then dissolving and painting over it. And eventually you start to notice that no matter what you place upon this canvas, as soon as you dissolve it, as soon as you release it, as soon as you let it go, these karmas, these stories, these desires, these wants, these emotions, any and all of it, thoughts, gone. That there's always this blank canvas behind it. It seems as if the blank canvas is what is real, because it is what is permanent. It is what is seemingly everlasting, and that it represents this unchanging, permanent state of emptiness. And this is what you often encounter in many of the Enlightenment-based traditions. They notice a canvas that is blank and empty and spacious. So Zen traditions, Buddhist traditions, some of the Vedic traditions, many of them will orientate in this way. And so the tradition that builds around this orientation is one of dissolving and releasing and letting go. In order to continuously remove the stories, to remove the emotions, to remove the wants and the karmas, and to eventually arrive at a place where there is nothing but emptiness and spaciousness. And this is what we might call primordial awareness, or the witness state, that is so commonly understood to be the epitome of these traditions. The thing that they are trying to cohere with on a consistent basis is this witness state. This is one of the reasons why in the Zen and Buddhist traditions, traditionally, there's actually the understanding that the soul doesn't actually exist. The soul isn't real in the sense of it being this unchanging, permanent thing. More so, it's just a set of processes and conditionings that are self-perpetuating, and it is these conditionings which go through the process of rebirth over lifetimes. And so many of these traditions are seeking to permanently remove any and all trace of the paint, to leave behind only the blankness, which is essentially what they believe is the point of the spiritual process, to simply stop the process of engaging with any and all of this. The painting doesn't matter. And rebirth is just work and not really satisfying. So we stop and we end this process and we leave it blank. That is one overall orientation. And seemingly in some of these traditions too, like tantric traditions, for example, you'll get a process, a set of practices that will paint over this canvas again and again, and then dissolve again and again, in order to continuously reinforce the idea that anything that emerges on the canvas is totally temporary and not real. And of course, any set of practices that you engage in will, by their very nature, expose you to a particular type of phenomenon in a particular kind of orientation, and they will reinforce the reason why you're doing the practice. And that's true for the next orientation, which I'm going to speak about. So we have this blank canvas orientation. Now, the other orientation is different. The person wakes up and notices that there is a painting emerging on this canvas, and suddenly they decide that they want to engage with the painting. That the reason for the canvas and the paint is to create something beautiful, a work of art. And through this engagement, you begin to start to realize that you have to deal with some of what's there already. You have to start to take some of what has already been painted on the canvas and bring it into your painting. You can't exactly start from scratch. Now, here is the thing too, is that this particular orientation can recognize the blank canvas underneath as well. They can recognize this primordial witness state and this state of emptiness. And so dissolving and releasing become but a tool, not the point. It is a tool in the tool set of the painter, of the artist, to remove layers that are simply in the way of the painting. But this person can't totally dissolve everything back purely to the blank canvas, because doing that in and of itself is a very difficult process, because one of the things that's occurring with both of these paths is that you fall asleep again. And you have to keep waking up, because every time you fall asleep, painting starts to happen regardless of whether you want it or not. So you have to keep waking up and keep dissolving and keep resolving what's there, releasing it in order to get a fully blank canvas. And so the person who is engaging as the artist of the soul is someone who is also falling asleep. Paint happens again, and we need to wake up and start to work with what's there, or try to dissolve and release some of what's there to get back to the spaciousness, the emptiness, which gives us the ground through which we can then create again. So the blank canvas is meant to be painted upon or to be made a part of the picture. The point is not the blank canvas. The point is the painting in this particular path. And one of the things that this path seeks to do is to wake up as often as possible in order to be lucid in the painting process, to realize that there is this dream that is emerging into reality through this process of painting, and that the path that we have chosen is to dream the most beautiful and meaningful painting that we can. And what this path is seeking to do in the long term is to feel a sense of completion, to reach a point of satisfaction where they are done, so to speak, with the painting. And that could be represented as the single lifetime that a person is within, that is reaching death, feeling complete. Or it could be thought of as the process of the soul moving through many lifetimes within the context of this plane of existence and simply being done with it and potentially moving on. And this path is the one that is characterized by the contemplative traditions, by many of the mortality traditions that seek to create a soul and fuse it with the personality so that all of that survives the death process. And the rebirth doesn't have to continue. And in this way, we might think that the point is to create such a beautiful and meaningful painting that we can put it up permanently, in a manner of speaking, in the gallery of the gods, so to speak. And this is where you also find many of the shamanic traditions as well. However, in the shamanic traditions, there's a little bit different of an aspect, and that is that the shamanic paths start to look around and notice that there are beings surrounding this painting process. Some may be painting their own painting. Some may be watching you and standing next to you. Some may be standing behind you, as in the case of ancestors. And this person then calls in some of these beings and makes space on their canvas for them to add their piece to the painting. But nonetheless, the point is still to dream into reality a beautiful painting. And so this is the path of the soul artist, in a manner of speaking. And this is a term that I am simply choosing to give. It's not something that is necessarily historically relevant, but it is illuminative of a particular path. Now, these two different orientations, they tend to go in different directions with what they feel the point of spirituality even is. So on one end, the blank canvas group, they think that the point is to resolve and dissolve and release everything to return back to the witness state, to return to the blank canvas. And enlightenment is something that can be felt when they look at a person and they see a blank canvas there, just emptiness, someone who is reflecting back to them, nothing but themselves almost, right? Whereas the soul artist sees spirituality in the artistry itself, in the meaning making, in the soul making process within the context of manifestation. So in this way, manifestation is not seen as separate from the divine, nor as something to get away from, but simply an aspect of it already. And the blank, spacious canvas was meant to be painted over, and that is the point. And so as we engage with the painting, the stories, the ancestral patterns, the karmas, we get to choose what we feel is just right, what is beautiful and what is worth keeping and what isn't. And we get to take the things that happen even when we're asleep, even the things that we didn't mean to do, and turn them into happy accidents. And so a splotch on the side of the painting might become a mountain or a bird. And the ancestral and karmic patterns could end up being these core features of the path, and possibly the things that happened to us while we were young, even though possibly painful, are fuel for the painting, because some of the greatest art emerges out of the pains and the wounds and the passions and the tensions. All of this can be a part of the painting. And so can some of the blankness, so can some of that spaciousness and emptiness. But in the end, what that person is seeking is a sense of the soul being very present and manifest as an actualized individual force that owns that sense of authentic expression here and now. So this is a path that is often more worldly and interested in the manifest world as an unfolding thing that is already complete in and of itself. It is not something that requires us to try to fix it or to return back to it in this sense of feeling that it is a broken phenomenon. but more so something that is already inherently worth being within as a soul. And so in this way, soul can be appreciated for whatever it is that is currently occurring at the level of the soul. While one might look for enlightened masters, the other looks for people who are full of soul in the context of the worldly experience, of the engagement with the personality, with the stories, with the desires, with the dreams, with the wants, and with what's unfolding in the now. And so I want to leave you with that and give you this general overall sense of two of the big primary general directions that you see many paths unfold. And often I see that a lot of people get stuck because they don't recognize that they're on one path or the other. And in a sense, they're kind of going back and forth and trying to kind of do both things at once. And while that's certainly feasible and viable, and it's something that a person may want to do, it's often something that prevents us from truly aligning from the deeper core aspect of our path. And we are asked to then decide what it is that we want out of the experience that we're engaging with, to return to this serene, blissful, smooth, blank canvas, or to get involved in the muck, to get our hands dirty with paint, to deal with the frustration that can come with trying to create a beautiful painting and then falling asleep and realizing that what we were working on got ruined again. And again, and that we have to just engage with the work and dissolve and release and paint over and find new paints and new brushing techniques and new methods and re-envision what we think the painting is supposed to be. And both of these paths have their negatives and drawbacks, and both of them have their benefits and boons. And I myself am very firmly on the path of the soul artist, and I am not interested in the blank canvas for its own sake, although I can deeply appreciate the power that the spaciousness and the emptiness offer to the painting process, and how they might actually emphasize certain aspects of what is on the canvas already. And so with that said, a lot of the material that moves through eating ancient virtue is about learning to be a more skillful painter, not how to be more skillful at reaching a purely blank canvas. And so in that way, the work may not resonate as much with those who are on one path versus the other. So this is this idea that I hope gives you perspective and aids you in your path, in your soul-making process.